Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me tonight here. Last night we covered an exclusive report here on the show about what's happening in the state of Missouri. That report actually blew up, got lots of people in terms of, people watching it, people curious about it, people also rightfully enraged. Tonight we're airing part 2 of this exclusive report. I will tell you that this is even more explosive than last night. There are interviews lined up. Of course, we're going to be interviewing here on the show tonight rural Missouri political activist Susie Wilson. She's going to be on the Jeremiah Patterson Show, as well as an exclusive interview with Missouri State Representative Elizabeth Fuch. Where this story starts, and from my recollection of putting all this together tonight for part 2, if you go back to the summer that Roe v. Wade was overturned, here, The Guardian published this article, Why U.S. Women Are Deleting Their Period Tracking Apps. Obviously, this is heavily concerning here. Also, it piques your interest. Like, why is this happening? The subheadline reads here, quote, even before the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the trend to ditch the apps began amid fears of prosecution. Quote, many American women in recent days have deleted period tracking apps from their cell phones amid fears the data collected by these apps could be used against them in future criminal cases in states where abortion has become illegal. The trend already started last month when a draft Supreme Court opinion that suggested the court was set to overturn Roe v. Wade was leaked, and has only intensified since the court on Friday revoked the federal right to abortion. These concerns are not baseless, as with various other apps, cycle trackers collect, retain, and all times share some of their users' data. In a state where abortion is a crime, prosecutors could request information collected by these apps when building a case against someone. Quote, if they are trying to prosecute a woman for getting an illegal abortion, they can subpoena any app on their device, including period trackers, said Sarah Spector, a Texas-based criminal defense attorney and ex-prosecutor. But every company has their individual storage and privacy policy about how they use and how long they store data, Spector added. So it was a year after The Guardian published that article essentially about, women deleting period tracking apps, that this form here started floating around in the state of Florida. And you see how essentially it asks you regular questions first. Do you feel stressed out? A pretty normal question. Until you get to the females only section, they start inquiring about menstrual cycles here. When was your first menstrual cycle? When was your most recent menstrual cycle? Period. How much time do you usually have from the start of one period to the start of another? How much periods have you had in the last year? What? What was the longest time between periods in the last year? So once again, these are oddly specific questions here that are, being prompted essentially to young girls in the state of Florida. It is the females only section. They're being prompted to answer these questions, of course. It says it's optional, but why is this even on the form in the first place? It's deeply, deeply concerning. It is very, very intrusive and also quite creepy. Why would you want that information? The outrageous and highly specified disturbing questionnaire ended up getting taken down. And essentially, it got so much attention and pushback and controversy and people raising their eyebrows, rightfully so, that in an overwhelming 14-2 vote, the Florida High School Athletic Association's Board of Directors voted to remove the question about high school athletes' menstrual history. This was from NPR, quote, Thursday's emergency meeting focused on the debate around menstrual cycle information, but in a less discussed change to the requirements for Florida athletes, the newly adopted form asked students to list their sex assigned at birth. The previous version asked only for sex. These are particularly fraught questions at a time when many people are worried about how their reproductive health information might be used, both because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and because of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' support for a law banning transgender women athletes in girls' sports. End quote. When this major encroachment in violation of student privacy rights essentially ended, there were headlines everywhere. The AP reported, Florida backs off athlete menstrual data, but debate lingers. CBS 42 News reported here, Florida will no longer ask high school athletes about their menstrual cycles, but many states still do. That Florida questionnaire was listed as optional. That section did not have to be filled out, but the audacity to even ask questions like that is extremely disconcerting and highly inappropriate. Last night, we aired an exclusive report here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show in which Missouri Democratic State Representative Elizabeth Fuch told me that a high school band program is asking for information about young girls' menstrual cycles as a requirement to join the band. Yesterday, before recording that report, I confirmed with her that this is indeed true. I also reached out to the ACLU of Missouri and the St. Louis Public Schools Communications Department because I was under the impression, essentially, that this was possibly transpiring in District 80, which is St. Louis, the area Representative Fuch represents. That is not the case. According to new documents provided to the Jeremiah Patterson Show by Susie Wilson, who has elevated the story on TikTok, she has a close friend that is an administrator at another local school district that has confirmed that this is happening. And it is being operated through a third-party vendor specifically contracted to provide these forms. The school in question here is Southern Boone High School. As you can see on this screenshot, the third-party vendor is Final Forms. Now, as you can see, the date here is 2024. There's relevancy to that in a little bit. Stay tuned. But essentially here it says, they are an online forms and data management system used to collect and manage information related to academic, medical, and athletic paperwork. You can also see the question being asked here, though. It is right here in the females only section. It asks, have you ever had a menstrual period? The options are yes or no. The next question, how old were you when you had your first menstrual period? When was your most recent menstrual period? How many periods have you had in the last 12 months? Again, why are we asking these questions to young teenage girls who are seeking to join the instrument, who are seeking to join the band, who are seeking just to play instruments? Again, look at the questions here. Have you ever had a menstrual period? How many periods have you had in the last 12 months? Very, very specific questions. And unlike that story out of Florida, this one is quite frankly even more disturbing. I mean, it's hard to sleep at night just following this. According to parents, you cannot bypass this question. It is required to answer. And if you do not fill that specific section out, you cannot move forward. It essentially says that the registration process is incomplete. Now, why would this data need to be collected? Is the collection of menstrual cycle data a current requirement for other programs as well, and not just the band? Also, essentially, when we get into the heart of this, who approved this? Especially given the major FERPA and HIPAA violations, which are essentially violations, multiple massive violations of federal privacy laws. Also, quite frankly, since we're going to be, blunt about this, what is the justification for collecting the menstrual cycle data information of young teenage girls who are seeking to play instruments? I was very curious about this and regarding all these questions, so I reached out to Clay Bernett. He is the co-CEO at Final Forms. He answered my questions in an email here. As you can see, he said the questions regarding menstruation disclosure would be included by the MSHSAA. That is the Missouri State High School Activities Association. In addition to that, Mr. Bernett also told us that school districts are customers and may request that Final Forms modify any form or field therein based on their school district policy. Quote, Final Forms provides school districts a locked platform, the main point of contact. An authorized administrator then authorizes access to information based on staff, roles, and responsibilities. Only a limited set of users can see all data. Band directors, coaches, or other activity group leaders only have access to emergency contacts and other critical emergency information, which does not include questions number 29 to 32. So once again, he's referring to the menstrual cycle questions. Furthermore, see below 1, All data collected is requested or required by your school district, your district's athletic department, your state departments of education, and your state's revised code. All users with access to student data are provisioned by the school district with specific level of access. Notes about 1 and 2. The information collected via final forms by your school district includes the same data previously collected on paper. Your school district may provide data access to the same personnel with the same permissions they had in any previous system, whether paper or online, and your data will assuredly, it's in bold here, assuredly be even more secure. Parents and or students may inquire to their school district about the requirement of any given field that is either required or optional in regards to the participation. In reference to number 2 above, if the school district, likely via board decisions, decides to request the removal of fields from final forms, we always comply with these requests. End quote. So once again, that is a response to the Jeremiah Patterson Show by the co-CEO of Final Forms, telling us exactly, essentially, the whole process here. Now, per his recommendation, we did reach out to the Missouri State High School Activities Association, and I spoke over the phone today with their executive director, Dr. Jennifer Ruckstad, by phone. She told me that this section is not required and said, essentially, that they have made clear that no collection of this type of sensitive information should be happening. Dr. Ruckstad told our show that the medical eligibility form is the only thing that schools should be collecting. I asked if anyone had access to this information other than the school nurse, of course, who would presumably have this information, and she said that that should not be the case. We have exclusive information tonight that essentially, an exclusive claim to the Jeremiah Patterson Show that actually points to otherwise, that is not the case, that certain band directors are having access to this information. Now, of course, this obviously is major here. We're following this story very closely. Final Forms told us essentially that a limited set of users can see all this data. And in this case, you have to ask the questions here. Who are the limited set of users who has access to this information regarding teenage girls' menstrual cycles? Also, we know that band directors, coaches, and other activity or group leaders have only, access to this in terms of emergency contacts. But, you have to wonder here. You have to wonder who access is being granted to in this case. According to Tina Ray, who has also discussed this story on TikTok with images confirming these questions are being asked, a Pattonville high school mom said essentially that she has never been required to answer this question before. A mother in Webster Groves, Missouri, has a daughter and has said the same thing. The question has never been asked before. Now, when I spoke to Dr. Ruckstad from MSHSAA, she said that this is the second year of partnering with Final Forms. So that's why on the form there it said 2024, July of 2024. We are now in the year of 2025, so that explains the date here. And we were curious to know if this question was just added this year or if, this was also present on last year's application. Following this story very closely here, I spoke with the ACLU of Missouri, their communications department, and provided them with this information that I'm presenting to you here tonight. And, they are deeply concerned. I spoke to their communications director. He said that he spoke with the legal team there at the ACLU. They're looking into this and providing them with this information, of course, about what's happening right there. But the concern, of course, is, since this is happening, of course, multiple confirmations, since this is happening here, something definitely has to be done. Something definitely has to be done. And whether it is, the ACLU getting involved here or continuing to push this out from state representatives speaking about this is extremely egregious information that is required to be disclosed. Why would you want to know when the clarinet player is starting her menstrual cycle? While we were preparing for this report tonight, Clay Bernett, the co-CEO of Final Forms, he reached back out to my show, telling us that he spoke with Dr. Rexted by phone and informed us exclusively that both the Missouri State High School Activities Association and Final Forms were going to make a statement today regarding their optionality to include or exclude any questions based on their school districts, likely their board and legal counsel guidance. We now have that statement. It was emailed to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. I'm going to read it to you verbatim here. This is directly from the co-CEO of Final Forms emailing this to our show. Quote, "To our valued Missouri school partners, we want to address recent questions and concerns regarding the inclusion of certain medical questions, specifically those related to the menstrual cycle on forms used by your school or district through the Final Forms platform. Final Forms exists to serve your school by digitizing the forms and information your team requires based on guidance from your school board, district leadership, legal counsel, and governing bodies such as MSHSAA. We do not create or mandate form consent. Instead, we implement the exact forms and fields that your school or district request, many of which are modeled after standardized state forms such as MSHAA pre-participation physical evaluation. Important clarifications. Schools may request to remove any medical questions from Final Forms based on your school board policy or legal guidance. We recommend reviewing the following two forms within your Final Forms form set. Past and ongoing health conditions. Replies to these questions appear on the student e-card and are visible to band directors, coaches, and or leaders or activity groups assigned to their user with Final Forms. The information is part of the annual pre-participation document, a MSHSAA requirement. MSHSAA PPE physician questions response to these questions are only visible to administrators, used in a printed version for the student's physician set. Upon receiving such request, Final Forms will promptly update your site to reflect your district's decisions. Access to all sensitive medical data is tightly controlled by your school district's administration, with permissions granted solely by authorized school district personnel based on staff roles and responsibility. Band directors, coaches, or activity leaders do not have access to detailed medical data collected on the MSHSAA PPE physical questions form, such as menstrual cycle responses. We recognize and take seriously the responsibility of protecting student privacy and empowering local control over data collection practices. We remain committed to working in full partnership with each Missouri school district to ensure both compliance and care in every form field. If you have questions or would like to review or modify your current forms, please email us at support@finalforms.com. Thank you for your continued trust in Final Forms. Sincerely, the Final Forms team." Once again, that press release is exclusive to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. It is officially been published out there, that has been sent out to school districts as a result of reporting and reaching out to them, essentially inquiring about this. So once again, they are saying they're telling the Jeremiah Patterson, well, not telling us, they're making it clear here, but also and making it informed here that while there certain replies are available for band directors to see, essentially information regarding, menstrual cycle data collection, that information is not visible to band directors, coaches, or activity leaders. They do not have access to that information. But it also goes on to say here that access to all sensitive medical data is tightly controlled by your district's administration, with permissions granted solely by authorized school district personnel based on staff roles and responsibilities. So, the information is not supposed to be disseminated to band directors or others. But if your district is doing that, then your district is doing that. Final Forms has been very cooperative with the Jeremiah Patterson Show in terms of getting back promptly. I reached out to them. I sent out an email at 6 a.m. They responded instantaneously to our show. Now, with regard to this and how deeply concerning this is, Again, as I said, this story is extremely grotesque. It actually blew up on TikTok as well as Substack and also on YouTube, on all of our platforms reporting this major violation of student rights. Now, we do know that Project 2025, of course, is Donald Trump's agenda for this country in favor of rolling back privacy protections that would make personal information, like when young girls start their period, more accessible to law enforcement. Project 2025 is specifically keen on that, which raises massive concerns for privacy for individuals using their period tracking apps and other digital health tools. But also, hey, if you want to join a Missouri high school band, they're going to ask you essentially, when was your last menstrual cycle? Why is that question on the form? Why is this question even being asked in the first place? What is going on? Susie Wilson, she is a rural Missouri political activist. She's been elevating this story on TikTok and speaking about this boldly to raise hell about this and also to demand that we get answers. She joins me next. Stay with us. The Jeremiah Patterson Show is an independent news media platform. If you want to see more special reports like this, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at TJPS News. When you become a paid subscriber, you'll get immediate access to exclusive content, opinion pieces, the upcoming Resistance podcasts, and The More You Know, a series focused on diving deeper behind the headlines with historical context. One viewer who upgraded said, quote, "Your show is insightful, thought-provoking, and engaging. You shed light on key issues, inspire conversations, and tell impactful stories. Your passion and dedication shine through in every piece, keeping me informed and inspired," said Dr. Lisa. "I do this because it matters, because the investigative journalism is imperative, and most of all, I'm unabashed and unafraid to tell the truth. Upgrade now from free to paid for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year." Joining me now for the interview tonight is Susie Wilson. She is a political activist in rural Missouri. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me.
So since this story has officially been out there for a while, there has been a lot more confirming reports about this. What have you learned today in conversations with others and just other sources about what's going on here?
Well, I've had one local school administrator reach out to me and say that they're using a third-party vendor, which I believe you have, Final Form.
Yes.
And then I had another school official from here locally reach out and say that it's part of the Missouri State High School Athletic Association form. And they've been using it for years. Although they didn't necessarily like it, they did not edit it.
Mm. Now, one of the concerning things here, of course, is the question that is being asked essentially regarding to, asking for young girls' menstrual data. I covered last night in sort of part one of this, the story of the former state health director collecting menstrual cycle information for women in the state. I believe that was back in 2019. Um,
Yes.
when you cover it's hard to cover a story like this out of Missouri and not think back to that history, but also the Attorney General of the state, Andrew Bailey, who is someone that is extremely hostile and draconian when it comes to women's rights. What do you make of that?
Yes, he is. There is evidence that he wants to use a period tracker and use Planned Parenthood. Also, Missouri passed Amendment 3. The
Mhm.
voters passed that. And the state legislature on the last day of regular session overturned the will of the voters. And so coming out of Missouri, wanting to know that private personal data about a female is very concerning because on the form, there are no questions about a male
Mhm.
regarding their sexuality or physical development. And I did have a band director reach out to me today because her she thought that this wasn't a big deal. But according to her, they're keeping that information. She has the information. Now it's not supposed to serve any purpose, but she has the information. So where is this information going? What's the purpose for it? And They're saying, well, just the doctor has it, but she's saying they have it.
Mm.
So where's it supposed to be?
So just to clarify here, the band director at one of the local schools in Missouri has told you that she has access to the menstrual cycle information?
She has access to the form. So whatever they've put on that form, she has access to.
Mm. Wow, that is definitely an explosive claim. It is honestly, I just wrapping my head around this story is insane. I mean, I've spoke today with the co-CEO of Final Forms, and he told me actually, during a press release because they just released this, essentially here, quote, band directors, coaches, or activity leaders do not have access to detailed medical data collected on the form, essentially, especially regarding menstrual cycle responses. Then he also goes on to say that we recognize and take seriously the responsibility of protecting student privacy. But if that is not the case here, I mean, that is honestly just vastly, vastly inappropriate and deeply concerning. I mean, one of the things that was interesting in terms of looking into this is the fact that even talking to the co-CEO here is that access can be granted essentially to any official. What do you
Right.
make
Where
of?
where is this form stored?
Yes.
Who does have the information? Does the third party have this in their database? Does the school have it in their filing cabinet? Is it stored on a cloud somewhere? And what are they doing with it? That is my biggest fear.
Hmm.
And if that was to get into the wrong hands, that's when a girl ovulates. It is a huge violation of privacy. And doesn't high schools have to follow FERPA?
Yes.
Okay. It's a violation of FERPA, that's for sure.
And I reached out to the executive director at MSHSAA, and she told me essentially that schools have been told not to be collecting that type of information, not be collecting that data. But of course, if that is not happening here, of course that is extremely concerning. It is not just a violation of FERPA, but also essentially federal privacy laws here. What do you think should happen as a result of this? I mean, I've reached out to the ACLU of Missouri. They said that they're looking into this. Um,
I've heard that this has been struck down in Florida, but they're also asking for this information in Texas. I think we need to know why and what are they doing with the information. But frankly, it's not anybody's business. And
mhm.
it's not our business about sons either. So it's very concerning about our daughters and our granddaughters, especially in Missouri during this time.
Mm. Once again, my guest tonight is Susie Wilson. She is a political activist on TikTok, just continuing to spread the word about this story. She is in rural Missouri. Susie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
I do want to add, and you can put this wherever you want to, the local administrators that did reach out to me, they're using the final form as it's given to them from the Missouri State High School Athletic Association. They're not changing it in any way.
Mm.
So it's a copy paste for them.
Wow. Okay. That is once again, this story continues to get more and more explosive as we're continuing to follow it here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Susie Wilson, thank you again.
Thank you.
Once again, that was my interview with Susie Wilson. She is a rural Missouri political activist. We've been following this story very closely here. Obviously, some bombshell information revealed in that report claims that a Missouri high school band director actually currently has access to the responses on that form in regard to menstrual cycle information. Why is that of value? Why is that a need to know when it comes to joining the band? We do not know. We are continuing to chase this story and to check it out. But one of the things that is deeply, deeply disturbing when it comes to a story like this, when you cover Missouri politics, is the fact that the Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, has been involved in essentially suing to get the data, to get records of women in the state of Missouri seeking an abortion. He recently sued and won for Planned Parenthood in order for them to release the records on women seeking to get an abortion in the state of Missouri. seeking to get those medical records, but also to get the medical records essentially of people trying to, have gender affirming care in the state of Missouri, seeking to get that information. We covered last night here on the show, in terms of the history of Missouri, that the former Missouri State Health Director, Dr. Randall Williams, was seeking to access the menstrual cycle information of women in the state.
And in the last column there, it includes the department's calculation of the woman's last normal period, right? Yes, sir.
Yes, this is happening. We were tracking women's periods in the state of Missouri. So once again, this story has multiple different parts, but it's important to tell this story not just in its current iteration, but understanding that this is even more worse and nefarious when you know the history of Missouri politics and someone like Andrew Bailey being the Attorney General. I spoke earlier today with State Representative Elizabeth Fuch exclusively here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. This was our interview. Joining me now for the interview is Missouri State Representative Elizabeth Fuch. Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me back.
Since this story officially broke last night in our exclusive report, there has been major revelations today. I've done essentially contacting various organizations and individuals on the ground. What information or conversations have you had with others about this story?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I kind of knew that something you had talked about on your show was out into the digital world when I was scrolling on Facebook yesterday and saw somebody that I'm connected with on Facebook was saying my name and that this was a thing and that this was happening, and I was like, oh. And so then I texted you, and so I have been talking with that particular. So this is a human in Missouri. I think more rural. I kind of don't even really, how the digital world works. I don't even really. But we're connected, and so we've talked through like online channels, just about things that she has discovered. And so that's pretty much, that's one of the people that I've talked to. I've talked to somebody from a school just as they were trying to kind of figure out what was happening. And so, yeah, those are then maybe a couple of my colleagues, like what we can maybe do from our side. So those are the conversations I've had since you and I have spoken last. Mm-hmm.
One of the major concerns here, if you just, go back to the history of what's been happening in the state of Missouri, is the former state health director under, the Mike Parson administration collecting data on, women's menstrual cycle in the state. And then, of course, Andrew Bailey, the current attorney general, suing Planned Parenthood to get information on women seeking an abortion in the state. This story appears to not be relatively known by some people. It is now starting to blow up. I'm interested to know if you are concerned that the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, could potentially see this and look into this. Are you concerned that this would be something he would want to have access to?
You and I had kind of spoken a little bit before we started the interview about my concerns with the intentions of the Attorney General when it comes to his extreme overreach of governing abortion care or restricting access to abortion care. He's not just sued for access to the medical records of people seeking abortions. He's also sued for the medical records of people seeking gender affirming care. And so he does have kind of a history, if you will, in his short term, previously as unelected, now as elected Attorney General. He does have a history of using the office to attempt to gain access to people's medical records. And, sometimes exposing or just discussing stuff like this does shine a light in a way that maybe people didn't know before, from both sides, right? Mm-hmm. And so it is, I believe, very important to tell the story. And I do worry about how we're able to protect the information that is collected from those that third party platform, so we can protect our students. And to clarify something that was said in the original story, the form I believe that I know of, the information can be skipped. Doesn't say optional. You could skip it. You could skip not filling it out. So I would encourage Missouri parents, skip it. Like there's a little bit that we can do. If it comes through your district, if you see that on a form, skip it. And for now, so we can stop the collection before we know how to stop the entire process.
In a press release, in regard to something that we reached out to the platform here, Final Forms. One of the things that they said essentially is that band directors, coaches, or activity leaders do not have access to detailed medical data collected on the MSHSAA PPE physical questions from such as menstrual cycle responses. They end up going to say here that we recognize and take seriously the responsibility of protecting student privacy. I'm interested in your response to sort of this press release, and I guess the concerning part here of who has access to this information and when, and also why this question is even on, the form to join the high school band, and potentially if this is something new or something that has been happening for a long time.
These are all questions that have kind of been brought up over the last 24 hours. And I know I'm going to use the access and privilege of my office as a state representative in Missouri to find these answers out with you. I appreciate your ability to have heard something in our interview that was like, because for me here in Missouri, that's how it is. To hear that someone out there, we don't know where the true source is at the moment, right? Is collecting this information or has the ability to. It's just kind of run of the day, show me state stuff here. So for you to go, hey, let me look into that a little bit. I appreciate it very much. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Absolutely. I mean, I did reach out to the ACLU of Missouri here. I spoke to their communications director earlier this morning. One of the things that they had said when they had presented this to their legal team is that they were heavily concerned about this and is going to look into this further here. In regard to this being, of course, not just, student privacy violations, but also FERPA and HIPAA violations, what do you believe should happen here in regard to not just the ACLU potentially getting involved, but, others continuing to speak out about this story?
I appreciate that the Final Forms has been able to communicate with you, and they've been so forthcoming with information. I appreciate that the ACLU is also hearing some red flags and going to look into it. I have a great working relationship with the ACLU. Prior to being an elected official, I was the lobbyist for LGBTQ equality in this state, so I worked very collaboratively with the ACLU on many, many issues. And so I'll reach out to some of the folks over there and see how we can collaborate on this and anything that I can do to support them, because I would like to see us find out why, they're asking this information, if we can get those questions removed from the form, and how long this has been going on, where does that data live, and how do we protect it from anyone gaining access to the information. That's what I would like to see happen, but more importantly, shutting it down. Yeah.
Once again, my guest tonight is Missouri State Representative Elizabeth Fuch. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your insight and spreading the word about this story.
Oh, Jeremiah, thank you so much.
Once again, that was my interview with State Representative Elizabeth Fuch speaking about what's been going on in terms of her speaking to her sources. Also, as she has continued to elevate this story as well, speaking to several other people about what's going on there. We're going to continue to follow this story here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. This was night 2 of covering this exclusive report. We are going to continue reporting on other news stories as this has been a busy news week. I know other news stories have been breaking, but I wanted to devote some time to this story that's happening out of Missouri because it is a major scandalous situation. Please be sure to share this as much as you can to get the word out about what's happening here, because obviously we do want to stop what's happening here, as egregious and insane as this is. Just completely incredulous and inconceivable that this information is being asked of. And it's something that fits normally into Missouri politics with the crazy Republicans, as they just overturned Amendment 3, which enshrined abortion rights into the state constitution after residents voted to put that there. And also there is now an abortion ban back in the state of Missouri, and residents are going to have to go back to the polls next year to vote on Amendment 3 here again, after they just voted to enshrine abortion rights into the state constitution. It is absolutely unbelievable. But the situation that's happening in Missouri, we're going to continue to cover that here on this show. If you enjoyed this video, if you have any information, be sure to reach out to the Jeremiah Patterson Show at tjpsnews@gmail.com. If you're a parent, if you have any information, screenshots, audio recordings, testimonials, please reach out to our show. We are interested in continuing to chase and to report on this story, doing the hard work that it is when it comes to investigative journalism here. All right, be sure to follow the Jeremiah Patterson Show on Blue Sky and Substack at TJPS News, as we report on all things news, politics, and history. If you would like to support the show, you can become a financial contributor for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. These are also the other ways to contribute to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Your financial donations do help, as this is independent journalism. Thank you so much for watching part 2 of this exclusive report. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. I will see you tomorrow.